Gonna build a mountain from a little hill.
Evening folks, this is Best in Slot bringing you the brand new gameplay trailer, the extended gameplay trailer for Planet Zoo. This is a longer version of what we saw the other day from E3. It comes with a developer commentary as well, and we've had a few new pieces of information confirmed since this video went up. I have already seen this, I actually did a video on it, but I learned quite a lot of new information since doing that video, and therefore wanted to try it again, do it again, and be able to bring you those little bit extra details that I've learned since I recorded the video in the first place. I will link the original video down below though if you want to check it out. It's about 17 minutes long, so this is going to be a fairly long video because I'm going to be pausing and saying things. If you want to hear the video without me prattling on over the top, you can do so at the link down below. I've had some comments, people tell me to shut up. That's kind of not the point of these videos. If you want to watch it interrupted, you can do that. If you'd rather me analyse and point things out, then you can do that right here as well. I know a lot of you have been enjoying this style of video. So, extended gameplay trailer with some actual gameplay, pretty cool. It is an edited trailer, you know, it does cut into things now and again. It's not pure, unadulterated, uncut gameplay, but it is very, very cool. Let's get started. Now we're going to skip forward just a tiny bit because they're going to talk and it's not really relevant to our lives. Sorry Bo, sorry everyone else. Shante, Lisa and fourth person who I don't know.
She's got and deep.
Okay, so let's go back to this.
And then Lisa is going to be our narrator on the journey, so let's take it away. So Lisa, what?
Pause. So, this is, of course, we've already seen this shot from the E3 trailer, but what we didn't see last time was the bar at the bottom, because that was cut out by the UI, the E3 overlay kind of thing. You can see a few different stats here. We can see our monetary, like how much money we've got. We can see our number of animals. We can see the number of park guests and whether that number is currently going up or down. We can see our star rating. We can see how happy our guests are overall. In the bottom right, we've got a camera rotate. We've got a time of day option. We've got a temperature and we've got a date. Now, I want to point this out because I said this in the other video I recorded. At the moment, that says there's 769 animals in the zoo, which is quite a lot and quite exciting. I believe it's been confirmed since this video went up that that is a placeholder, that this isn't necessarily reflective of the zoo, this is just placeholder information. So whilst we don't know of an animal limit, 769 would be quite a lot. So let's assume that isn't true for now and go from there.
Is Planet Zoo?
So Planet Zoo is the next installment in the Planet franchise. It is a fully detailed and deep management sim, and it will have a lot of new gameplay and new management that we've added to this to make it really a fully new experience. So
okay, just before I start talking again, I just want to say a lot of this is stuff we've seen before, so unless I've got anything new to bring, I'm just going to let a lot of the trailer play out, but we will pause and point out when brand new stuff happens. If you want to see my video on the other parts of the trailer that we're not going to double address, then check out my Black Wildebeest video on the channel or the playlist down below.
Can you tell us a bit more about the park that we're seeing here?
yes, so this park, we'll get a better view of it later, has been inspired on the Serengeti and the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. As you can see here, everything has been built piece by piece, just like you would in Planet Coaster. So it gives you that same kind of boundless creativity that you had back then, but with lots of new themes and assets. And now we're getting quite a nice view here. You can see we're in a crater, and this specific park is a safari experience. Yeah. So it's got a lot more open expanses than you might traditionally expect from a classical zoo. Watch the feces, watch
so
it.
These beautiful reticulated giraffes here. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the authenticity of each animal?
Yes, so for every animal that we create, we try and be as authentic as possible. We go into all the little details. How does it walk? How does it behave? You know, what does it look like? We try and really replicate the fur. We want to make it feel as lifelike as possible. And, you know, we do that for the big ones as well as we do for the little ones. So here you've got a little springbok. It's quite a lot smaller than the big giraffes are, but it's still got the same amount of detail to it. And if we try and get a close-up on one of our lovely giraffes, then we can see the fur shader that we've been working on, because it's really quite exquisite.
It is beautiful.
Here we go. I think the giraffes are a really good candidate for showing this off because they've got that lovely little mane in the back. They're all fuzzy and cute, and it gives you a really good opportunity to look at the little ear floppity flops that it does. So these will live in social groups. If the animal actually has a need for a social group, they will do that. They will live together, they will breed to create young. We'll be celebrating.
Okay, that's where I wanted to pause. That is our very first proper look at the baby springbok, because it was cut out of the other gameplay trailer. I just think it's very cute and wanted to point it out. It looks like it's about to get absolutely booted in the side, but it's got the teeny tiny little horns, it's got the paler colouring, and again, it's really worth mentioning the work that's gone in, because this isn't like you're just making 50, we know there's 50 plus animals in the game, or apparently much more. We're actually going to address that again a little bit later on with something else, with something very exciting. The main thing you're here to see based on the thumbnail, right? That's probably about 20 minutes into the video, by the way. So it's I mean, to an extent, you know, they're going to use similar animations and basic rigs and stuff like that, but you're not just making 50 plus animals, you're making 50 plus animals plus individual unique baby animals for each of those animals. It's quite a big, you know, it's a lot of work, it really is.
You know, the full life cycle in Planet Coaster.
And it's very cute.
With celebration when there's a birth and mourning when there is a death.
And each animal is unique?
Each animal is unique, so they are genetically determined. They will get genes from their parents. I know that fur, right? So they will look like their parents. So you can see family resemblance. Their patterns will be unique to the giraffes and stuff. So you will definitely be able to see, you know, where their lineage is, where they come from. And that's not just the way they look, that's also how long they will live, how healthy they will be, how well they will breed. All impacts it, so you have to really manage your animal population well.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, and it's lovely to see that you can have mixed habitats as well.
Yeah. Well, a lot of animals in the wild would, you know, live together. They have kind of traits that play well with each other.
Right.
And we've got another example of a mixed habitat just across the lake, which will illustrate that as well.
We're going back to our black wildebeest.
Absolutely outstanding.
They're so good. The character team does such a good job on them. And the animation team as well. It's all just stunning. So in this habitat, we have some zebra and some black wildebeest. And they, in the wild, they will also share because their complementary behaviors help them to detect predators.
Exactly.
So by putting them in the same habitat, we consider both the animal species to be enriched.
Oh, cool.
So this was an interesting thing I was wondering before, and there's going to be less talking at the start of this video on my part because most of the new information is kind of midway to the end of the video, by the way. When she clicks on the camera, now this is an edited gameplay trailer, but when she clicks on the camera and it starts jumping between all these shots, whilst I'm pretty sure in part that is edited, part of me is wondering how the action camera in this game is going to work. So the action camera in Planet Coaster, at least, it focused on a ride and it jumped to multiple different angles to show you all these intriguing and exciting angles of the ride. Now, that same aspect doesn't work as well in Planet Zoo because if you click an action camera on one animal, an individual animal doesn't change that much from second to second, right? Generally speaking, when it's asleep, nothing is going to happen. How do you get an action camera, different angles of that to make it interesting? The action camera here is jumping between animals quite a lot. I'm just wondering, there's not really much evidence for it, but I'm wondering if instead of focusing on that one animal, it'll jump between certain animals in that same exhibit just to make it a little bit more intriguing.
Cool.
Just a theory,
these
though.
are also herding animals, which means that they will feel the need to form a pack, and often you will see them herding together through the habitat.
Oh, that's amazing.
You just touched on animal enrichment. Can you
Yes.
tell us a bit more about that?
So there's a lot of different ways you can keep your animals happy. This can be, you know, by the basics of food and water, but also by providing them with items that provide enrichment, both in their food, as in, you know, things they like to do, playing, that kind of stuff. So you have to make sure that your animals have a lot of enrichment items to keep them happy and healthy mentally.
Okay, this is my only qualm with the game so far in terms of the modelling, and I think this is mainly to preserve memory, to preserve, you know, to stop people lagging, to let this game actually function on people's computers, is the fur shader is really, really nice, right? You see the fur on the body of these animals, it looks fantastic, and they've applied the same thing to the tail. So they've got like an elongated, wibbly-wobbly shape, and then they've put a fur shader on it. And whilst it looks okay, this isn't how the tail would look in real life. It looks... because it is just a bulk shape covered in fur, it kind of looks a little bit odd, whereas in real life it would of course be individual hairs. Now if it had NVIDIA Hairworks or something like that, that would be quite an easy thing to do, but it's also very computer intensive. It would be nice to see that as an alternative option. Most games do that. You can either have it off or you can turn it on, and when you've got it on it's very, very intensive. And for a game like this with so many animals, that would be quite a difficult thing to do. I do wonder if it would have been possible to make it a little bit more hairy, basically, so it looks less bulbous like that, but it is a minor nitpick at best. And generally speaking, the animals, the animations, the textures, the fur shader is brilliant. I just, it's okay to criticise a little bit as well.
Beautiful. When you select them, you can see there's so many different things for you to keep an eye on,
Yes.
for people to get stuck into.
There are a
really
lot
amazing.
of needs that you will have to tend as a player. There's a lot of really deep management, which I'm really looking forward to everyone exploring.
So as you said before, the terrain...
Just want to point out, actually, I didn't see this last time. If you look in the bottom right, you can now see there's 54 animals in the park. The guest number is moving. I suspect that's more realistic, basically. Not that 54 would be the cap. I imagine we can go quite a lot higher than that. This is a very spread out zoo. They'll actually mention that later on. But 54 seems more likely than 700 and whatever it was.
affects the animals.
Yes, and a good way to show this is by looking at our saltwater
We're
crocodiles.
about to see something amazing,
Yes,
folks.
so even though these guys don't have any fur on them, obviously, their scales look absolutely...
Look at the...
It's a baby crocodile. It's a baby crocodile. And again, this really hammers down what I've been saying about how the morphology is so intrinsically different between adults and the babies. Yeah, they're using the same rig and stuff, but look at the difference in the model. That isn't a copy and paste job. That is a fully redesigned, remade animal. The head is entirely different. The body has different scales. There's more prominent ridging along the tail. It's a lot of work, and I'm really impressed that they've done it. I did mention this in the other video that I was wondering how they'd go from baby to adult, and we really haven't seen any teenage animals. Now, somebody mentioned in a comment reply to me that they thought they heard mention of an ontogeny system in one of the articles or something like that. An ontogeny system is the word I was looking for, and that's basically where you see an animal grow. If you think of saurian, for example, if you've seen that, the Dakota raptor, you can see it grow from baby to adult gradually over time. It doesn't jump up, it naturally morphs into its adult body. That would of course be the best way to do this. That would be really cool, but it is quite a difficult system to implement, so we'll have to wait and see. We still don't 100% know what the case is there.
Amazing.
Details.
It is so
Amazing.
gorgeous. So terrain will impact the happiness of your animals. They will want a certain kind of makeup. They will want, a certain amount of soil, a certain amount of rock. They will want grass or trees, or will not want it, depending on what their natural habitat is like.
Okay, so again we have to pause. This is our very first look at the terrain. We have grass short, grass long, soil, rock, sand and snow. Now there are 10 terrain tools in the game, but they all fit within those 6 categories. Based on what I've worked out, we'll talk about that again in a second. But how this works, and we're going to see this in action in a moment as they try to fix the soil, is the thin little bar you see is how much of that stuff the animal currently has, and the wider white bar is the sort of minimum and maximum range. So if you look at this, it means the crocodile would be fine with no sand whatsoever, but it can tolerate up to, say, 20% sand, right? It needs at least a little bit of soil, it needs at least a little bit of rock, but not too much rock, because the bar doesn't go that far. It needs at least a little bit of soil, but if you wanted to add a lot of it, you could go a lot further with that. So I really like that they've got individual habitat requirements. I think big biomes in the way that we think of them from, say, Zoo Tycoon 2 is not a thing in this game. I'm now 100% sure that's no longer a thing. This is a much more realistic approach to zoo management. You're kind of rigging the existing environment with fairly natural terrains and fairly natural materials to make it more like what that animal would use. And that makes a lot more sense, if we're honest.
So your mission as a player is to try...
Okay, we just want to point this out as well because we haven't seen this before. The little biomes symbol on the left is terrifying. I don't know what that's all about. It's like an unhappy face with a... I imagine that's temporary. I want to point out continents, Australasia and Asia. That's pretty cool. Some people were wondering if they'd mention Australasia and maybe have this focus as an Asian animal. You can see the plant coverage is the same kind of thing. It's a bar that moves into a suitable range, and we can see how general the suitability is, and it's only 89%, so the exhibit could be a little bit better. We then have a list of plants, which are they currently in the... I'm not quite sure how this has worked. I think these are possibly the plants currently in the exhibit, right? So these are the plants it's got, and you can see it's got these warning signs, right, that they aren't appropriate. So the South America one isn't appropriate, the African one isn't appropriate. For some reason the Asian one isn't either, but maybe it's a different part of Asia. The point is, you're going to want to put thematically correct plants into your exhibit. That's if you want perfect welfare. If you want to theme your exhibits and you want to do a little design work and you want to mess around a little bit more, you could do that, but you'd have slightly unhappier animals.
Try and make the habitat you're providing for them here.
Also, one of those was called Custard Apple Ash, which is an amazing name that I've never heard of before. A little bit more here, things just keep popping up. I told you we learn a lot today. This is our first look at the enrichment screen. There are plenty more screens. The next one, we're not going to see the others. The next one looks like a family tree. The one after that looks like relationships. After that, we've got genetics. After that, we've got something else, I'm unsure, and then maybe a general info one. So you can see food enrichment and toy enrichment. There are two forms of enrichment. If you want to give your animals interesting ways to feed other than just these trays we see here, which is how they mostly feed, then you'll boost their food enrichment. You also need to give them something to do, something to play around with. We can see the prey-scented sack in the background just behind the crocodile is giving us 39 points out of 250. So either that isn't a great one, or you're going to need a few different toys to really max out that enrichment. But they've got plenty of bedding as well, so that's another thing you have to hit. You have to put down straw, you have to put down different materials that your animals are going to feel comfortable sleeping and resting on. There's a lot of detail in this, there really is. The management is significant. We saw this from the other day as well, where we saw the management screens. The management is far deeper than I expected. I've got to be honest, I'm actually really impressed with it so far. Also, a little look at a staff building on the left hand side, which is assumably the staff entrance in and out to feed your crocodiles. We're going to talk a little bit about that later as well.
As close to their natural habitat as possible. And here we can see their name's Malati, would like a little bit more soil in their habitat, and we can add that really easily.
You're going to see it
the
go up
terrain
here.
tools that we had in.
So, last thing on this subject, you can see here. So, like I said, there's 6 terrain distributions, but there are 10 terrain tools. Now, I believe what's happened is that there's maybe 2 short grasses, and that's the first 2, and then 2 or 3 types of soil, or 2 types of rock, and then 2 types of sand. You can see there's a darker, warmer yellow sand and like a lighter white sand. Then there's the snow, and then there's a long grass. So I think what we're seeing is multiple versions of the same thing, essentially. I don't think there's more than these 6 terrains, because it doesn't seem to scroll any further than that, but there are multiple ways of giving those terrains to your animals, so we get a little bit more variety and creative control there.
Coaster. So here you can see Sam selecting some soil. We're just gonna tweak those settings a bit.
Now, this is one of my favorite bits because it just immediately
Yes.
updates there, and it's so
So you can
well
see,
done.
yeah, by just painting in a bit more soil, the happiness level goes up, and something that was previously in Planet Coaster just aesthetics is now in Planet Zoo actually part of the management. So
Give us
you
pause, by
making
the way.
really pretty looking habitat is not just pretty for you, it's also perfect for the animal. It will be happier if it's got its own flora in there, if it's got the right amount of grass and rock and everything in there. So it adds a lot of meaningfulness to your creativity. And here we've got an African wild dog.
Playing around with the
looking
box,
really
adorable.
cute. And that's one of
And quick little pause there, because this is our first look at too many to mention, but so many different exhibit items. And we're not looking just, so this is all your habitat. You can see they've selected the habitat button at the bottom, so these are your habitat items. And if we look to the left, there's several categories. There is what looks to be, so there's infinite, which is all your items, there's food, there's temperature, there's shelter / sleeping, and there's also what I imagine is enrichment. So those are the 4 main categories of exhibit items, and we've got tons of them here. We can see the footballs again, we can see some bedding items, we can see the sort of the rolling statue thing, we can see what looks like a bowling pin, we've got a weird spiral ball. I wouldn't pretend to know what most of these are really from first glance, but the point is we're going to have a lot of options to keep our animals happy and educated and enriched, basically, and it's going to be important, obviously.
these enrichment items. As you can see, there's a bit of meat attached to it so that they can have that experience of eating in that way, as opposed to just being fed. But of course, they do have to be fed, and all of these needs, and then the habitat needs to be kept clean. And one of the ways you can do this is by hiring some staff. So here, Sam's hiring us a keeper.
He's a keeper.
As you can see, the keeper will go between habitats, checking up on how the animals are doing and if they need any food or drink. And then once he determines, oh yeah, these animals look like they're maybe a little bit hungry, he's going to go off into his keeper hut to prepare said food. And this is really exciting. So I'm happy to tell you guys that in Planet Zoo, the interiors of buildings are no longer off limits.
Someone just
You'll
go,
be able to see your keeper at work in his own little habitat. So here you can see he's going to start preparing some food. The food can be updated through research and made perfect for your animal's dietary requirements and needs. That will, of course, make it more expensive as well, which will play into the management side of things. There's been a lot of attention to detail, even in this. You know, a lot of the spotlight is on our animals and how authentic they are, but we also want to make sure that we keep that same amount of attention to detail in these things as well. So here we can see he's done preparing the food. So the food that you prepare will also be done per animal, and you can research more into the animal to make the food more appropriate for their specific dietary requirements and needs. This will also make it more expensive, so that plays into the management again. So here he's just going to quickly fill up that tray of these hungry dogs. There we go.
Feed.
Yeah, and they will come, sometimes they'll see the keeper entering, and they'll just be like, oh, it's food time, and they'll all start running towards the food tray, and that's really fun to see.
But in terms of zookeepers,
Yes.
how do you optimize their schedules and their time in your zoo?
Yes, so
to
you
run
can
it
place
efficiently?
down multiple keeper huts, which means that you know, you'll have more bases they can go to. Or you can place more habitat gates, but there's a downside to that. So the guests will not want to see the staff facilities.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, it upsets them. And that means you gotta find out a way to keep them separate. So either you put more scenery in front of it, or you use...
Okay, so I just want to pause here very quickly. So they're talking about the whole zookeeper thing, where I also love, by the way, look how they've curved the wall. You can just see here how it disappears. The fence disappears into the actual earth. So the fencing is there, but it disappears into the earth, and that's going to let us make some really natural, awesome looking exhibits. Anyways, so we've seen this before. There's multiple zookeeper paths. We're going to see those again in a second, so I don't want to pause again for that. But there's like 4 types of zookeeper path, which is pretty cool. And basically those are only able to be walked upon by your zookeepers, by your staff members. And the idea is to hide your staff buildings, hide those exhibit entrances, hide those paths in like this secret little maze around your park to hide it away from the guests, but give your staff members easy access to all of the exhibits. The reason we're pausing here, however, is we see how many different paths are in the game, and it's 11 different styles of path included in... Well, I mean, this is the alpha, right? So who knows if this increases or not, or gets added to later on in the game via new themes and stuff like that, but 11 different types of path. And there's some interesting things here. So the one that I really like is the width. So we can extend the width of our paths if you want to do those big central areas of your park, you know, kind of like Main Street in Jurassic World, stuff like that. You should be able to just really elongate these paths out wide and have that kind of... That's just a nice little bit of control. The one that did confuse me a little bit is length, because... it's a path, right? You just drag it the length that you want. But I assume the point is if you wanted set length paths, then you could set it here and you'd click on it, and then you'd be able to have several pieces of path of the exact same length if you wanted to do that for some reason, for design purposes, etc. So we're about to see the staff paths. Look out for those. There's 4 of those, and she'll mention the staff stuff.
Staff paths, which is a new feature that we've added to Planet Zoo. So these paths can only be walked on by the staff. Guests can't walk on it. And that means you can really easily cordon off certain areas of the zoo for staff only.
Staff only?
Yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah.
really
So
like that.
exciting.
So that allows you to maximize your keeper's, output while making sure that it's still, behind closed doors like you would in a regular zoo.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are seeing the Africa theme
African
here.
theme, yes.
Will there be different themes in the future?
There will be different themes. We'll be talking about them at a later date. I can't wait to show you guys the other ones that we've got in store, because there's some lovely things in there.
Lovely.
I'm really looking forward to it.
And Planet Zoo is quite big on, we're authentic.
Yeah.
We're not just a management game. We want to be, true to real life zoos as well.
Yeah.
And something that plays a huge role there is conservation and preserving, natural habitats of animals.
Yeah.
And sort of educating the guests about that.
Yeah.
How does that translate into Planet Zoo?
So Planet Zoo is based off the modern zoo. So as you said, we want to make sure that we educate our guests about the animals that they've come here to see. So nowadays, when you go to a zoo, you want to learn more about the animals that you're coming here to see. You want to know about their habitat. You want to know how they're doing. And one of the ways you can educate your guests is by using these Zoopedia screens. So these will be relevant to the animals in the habitat next to it. You place them close to a habitat. You can tell them to display information about one of the animals in the habitat. And then this information will get better as you research more into the animal, and thus your guests' education need, which is a new need that they come into the park with, will, you know, get filled up.
I just think that's worth a mention. That's a pretty cool feature. We did see those little signs and billboard things the other day. And whilst it's a very cool feature, you know, they recognise the exhibit and then pick out the animals in it to display, they did look a little bit bare, they looked a little bit boring, they lacked information. But it seems that researching our animals via looking after them, via actually doing research, we know there's a research screen in this game, we've seen that before in the management, stuff like that should hopefully mean those billboards are going to get more populated and more interesting with better information, which in turn means your guests are better educated, which in turn makes your zoo more successful.
Of course, rides played such an important aspect in Planet Coaster, but can you tell us about the rides that we're seeing here?
Yes, so this is one of our transport rides, which is a 4x4 off-road vehicle. Just like in Planet Coaster, the track is player defined and you have many options available to you for fine-tuning. You'll be able to change how it looks, you'll be able to change the colors, and you'll be able to set a ride price. So these are really handy if you want to get a really nice, good view of the zoo, and it's also an excellent way to rest tired feet for your guests.
Yeah, again, like, just to call out the animation team here, like, the little tiny movements on each animal, they're so authentic and gorgeous.
The leopards do
really,
look great.
really
We're about to
well
get a good look at them, I think.
Yeah, everyone's put a lot of hard work and soul into these animals.
Yeah.
These aren't just, you know, some animals that you come here and see. They have a personality, they have things they like to do, things they don't like, and they will respond, you know, appropriately. And that's one of my favorite things when you're testing this game. Sometimes we'll come in here and they'll all be asleep. Sometimes we'll come in here and they're all doing crazy stuff, and you can't anticipate that, just like you would in an actual zoo, and that's one of my favorite things about the game. So these are chimpanzees. They have very extensive social needs, very extensive enrichment needs that you will have to meet as a player, a very challenging animal, and they will also climb. So as a reminder, everything here is built piece by piece. It's just amazing to see all of this that you can build yourself. They can climb on anything that can be deemed climbable.
Wow, okay.
So if you want to go wild and build your own climbing frame, you totally can, and these chimps will love it. Yeah.
And you can use anything from trees, rocks, anything that's a climbable surface.
Yes, your animals will interact with everything that the player, you know, builds and makes. They'll be swimming and walking and climbing, player-made environments.
Amazing.
Yeah, which
you
is
have to
one
be
of, you
careful
know,
with those roofs as well.
Yes, yes, good point, Bo.
Yeah, I just want to mention that very quickly. So, we've already talked about this several times. You know how incredibly excited I am about the idea of this modular building system for the chimps. They're going to be able to climb and jump over. The animation is a little bit janky, I would say. When it was jumping between, it looked a little bit stiff, but that could always be smoothed out a little bit. But it's a very, very cool system where they're going to move between items very dynamically, basically. And that will include rocks and trees. So it's interesting. We're going to see a tree just in a second. I'm going to pause it again.
It's so much fun, and it means that, you know, again, your creativity is going to be really meaningful, because your climbing frame's not just going to look good, it's actually going to function. And that's, you know, one of my favorite things about this game. I think it has a touch of magic to it. To seeing the chimps just scampering everywhere is so satisfying.
Okay, so my point was going to be, there's a tree right here we can see, which if it deemed climbable, like most of the trees in the game hopefully are, then the chimps could, if you put this tree in the exhibit, the chimps would climb on it. So what Bo referenced, and what was said, you know, good point, Bo, was that if they can climb on the rocks and the trees, let's say you had a tree right next to this exhibit here, a climbable tree, and then maybe a pillar or something so it could get up there, the chimp could theoretically jump from tree to tree or onto a roof or anything climbable if you had two of them next to the exhibit, basically. So you're going to have to think quite a lot when building these structures in your chimp exhibit, whether they'll be able to get from one structure to outside of your structures, basically. Are they going to be able to escape based on just jumping between climbable objects, which is just a very cool, very surprisingly deep consideration I don't think you'd usually expect to make in a game like this.
But not just that, it's also an amazing achievement of the team to be able to pull this off. Like,
Yes.
that seems something really special.
We've had coders working on this pretty much non-stop for over a year now. They've put in so much hard work to get all of this up and running. And I think there's, you know, no one else is doing anything like this right now, so it's really special to us.
I know that a lot of people will want to see some of the small animals. These animals are absolutely outstanding, they're gorgeous,
Excited.
but we need to see some of the exhibit animals.
I am loving this tour.
Oh, it's amazing.
great.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the very first time, we got half an hour in, we are going to see the vivariums in the game. Vivarium, terrarium, whichever word you want to use. They're all the same size. Now we're going to get some information on this in a second. I just wanted to point out how incredibly excited this is, basically, how exciting this is.
There we go. So here's an example of an exhibit building. In this specific exhibit that we'll be showing you today, we have the lesser Antillean iguana.
So small.
So you can see
on the left, you can see the image right in front of it, where it looks like it's a little display image, like the billboards from before. Does that look like a turtle to you on the one on the left? It looks like a turtle to me.
him there. We're lucky that they're out and about. Sometimes they like to hide, which you might know from, visiting zoos yourself.
Absolutely.
These are the animals that usually you have to do a bit of looking for. So just like the other animals, these have things that you need to tweak to make them feel at their happiest. You can change the temperature and the humidity in their exhibits to match what they would usually expect from a habitat, and that will improve their general welfare.
So it's a lot more limited than the major exhibits in terms of your, you're not going to be managing terrain and stuff like that, but then we get these new stats, the ambient temperature, the humidity, little things that would matter a lot more in something like a vivarium, terrarium, whatever you want to call it.
They have needs, just like the larger animals, and they are just as important as your large habitat animals, and you have to take care of them the same way, and if you provide for them well, they will also breed. So there's a lot of enrichment levels that you can add to your exhibit, and these will add to their happiness with their habitat. And they will also mean that if you have two exhibits with the same animal in them, you can still make them look unique to each other.
Okay, because there's something else I want to point out that I'm not going to talk about in a second. So this is how much customization you're going to have in your vivarium, terrariums, whatever you want. I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to call it a vivarium, okay? This is how much customization you're going to have. Now, you're not going to be uniquely building every aspect of the inside of these enclosures. I suspect there are different types of enclosure. They're not all going to look like this with the bamboo and the logs and the vines and stuff like that. I imagine we've got multiple different ones that have multiple different enrichment levels, which I imagine are probably tied to research somehow. So enrichment level 1, you get these, you can add logs, you can add branches. Enrichment level 2, you can add rocks in there. Enrichment level 3, we got the basking lamps. So you're getting bigger and sort of more impactful items as you do research, as you find out more information on these animals. It's a very cool little system. I believe these aren't canned animations. I believe they are at least somewhat dynamic. We did see the iguanas there doing the exact same animation at the exact same time, but I imagine that's a little bit of a coincidence. There's two other things I want to say on this, quite important things. The first things first is this. If you follow my mouse, hopefully you can see that. 2 to the right of the operational one we're looking at here. This sort of like little glass pane. Now, whilst you won't be able to customize every single aspect of these vivariums, you're not going to be able to get rid of the bamboo and stuff like that. You're just going to be adding items in. We've heard in the past that you will be able to change like a backdrop or add stickers and decals and stuff like that to the glass. It's all a little bit wishy-washy and unconfirmed, but the look of this glass suggests at least the ability to change the glass, to add something to the glass to make it a little bit more interesting, like a little leaf pattern at the bottom or something at the top, or again a backdrop. Like you see in a lot of zoos, you'd have 3 glass walls or 1 glass wall at the front, and then the backdrop would be a photograph themed around where the animal would live, and it looks a little bit more like its natural habitat, so maybe that's what we're going to see. The other thing I want to quickly point out, and this is very exciting, is somebody asked during the live stream, asked Bo, whether the small animals, like this Antillean iguana, was going to count towards the 50 plus animal limit that they'd already mentioned, right? Because people were a little worried that it was going to be, say, 55 animals, but 15 of them were going to be quite small, and therefore wouldn't be as manageable. Because these are exciting, I love these, but they're not as in-depth or as overall interesting probably as some of the bigger animals for a lot of people. Not for me, but for a lot of people, right? And people are quite worried about that. Bo said, and I quote, "No winky face." Now, we think that's what she's referring to. I really don't want to throw anyone into it. I don't want to confirm anything 100%, but that is what happened in the chat at the time. It's already on the subreddit if you want to go check it out as well. So, potentially that means we're talking 60, 70 animals, if including the small animals as well. I would like to point out already that even if it was 40 large animals, that is a humongous roster, bigger than basically every zoo game ever made at release. Zoo Tycoon 2 had, I believe, 28 animals when it first came out, so this is already loads more. But yeah, isn't that, yeah, I know, it's exciting, right? I'm excited.
You could swap out which enrichment you're using on every single one.
So we've spoken about enrichment items, terrain, anything that can affect your animal's welfare. Is there anything else that we need to know?
Well, we'll have a little glimpse of it here, but obviously Animals' welfare depends on their environment most of the time. If it's a hot environment, you'll want to make sure that they're not too warm if they're not used to that, cold, not too cold if they're not used to that, and weather, just like you can see here. We will be going more in depth about weather at a later date, but we just want to give you a little sneaky peeky at what we've got going on here. If you build a shelter, they will shelter under it when it gets wet, or sometimes you can find these chimps sheltering under the bridge, which will also include the rain, so they can hide anywhere that the rain can't touch.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible the amount of detail for each individual animal that has gone into this game, and there's so much for people to explore and manage and creative. Like, there's something for everyone, it seems.
And there's so many things we haven't even touched on, you know, our biome selections, life cycles in detail. We've only shown you the tip of the iceberg when it comes to our animal list, and I'm really looking forward to talking more about these as we go along.
And there we go, folks. There is everything I say about this game gets more interesting. There you go, have a chimp. It's interesting she said biome selection, because that to me suggests, again, I've reaffirmed many times how I think the terrain system in this game is going to work, that you'll basically pick a biome for, like say you go into sandbox mode, you're going to pick a biome for that zoo. Arctic, savanna, British, whatever, you know, grassland, stuff like that, and then you're going to moderate around that. But we'll have to see. I am still curious. We don't really have that much information on that aspect of the game, how the weather system plays into that, stuff like that. Either way, tons of exciting information. Our first look at the iguanas properly. We did know they were on the way thanks to a Geekism video, but our first proper look at them, and our first proper look at the vivariums as well. Okay, I think I'm done. That was much longer than I anticipated. Actually, longer than the last time I recorded it. But I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you've learnt a lot in today's video. And if you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button. Of course, Planet Zoo Beta will be out within the next 2.5 months or so. It's coming out this summer if you pre-order the deluxe edition of the game. So it's not going to be that long until we get some more gameplay. I imagine things will calm down a little bit now that E3 is stopped, but we should still see new animals. We should get some more information in the coming weeks, and of course I'll bring you that as soon as it happens. Until then, thank you very much for joining me. Cheers, much love as always. Bye bye.
Which is one of, you know,
with those roofs.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help support me a little bit more, you can do so at patreon.com/bestinslot. There's a link in the description down below. Every little really does help in times like these, but it's not at all expected, and by just watching the video you've already helped me out massively, and it makes you a pretty cool person, so well done you. Thanks for joining me either way, I'll see you next time.